Hello everybody. This week we're looking into quantitative research and qualitative research. So followed by last presentation on primary research and secondary research. So this week we focus on qualitative and quantitative research. Quantitative research and qualitative research can also be primary or secondary. So there's no, they are not mutually exclusive, but they can all both refer to primary data, secondary data, and all quantitative or qualitative research. So for example, primary research may include qualitative data and quantitative data, similar as secondary research. Yeah. So and for qualitative research, it may include primary data and secondary data. So this diagram clearly shows you the connection and the interrelationship between primary research, secondary research, and qualitative research and qualitative data, in particular with reference to the data types. Okay. So here's a very good example and illustration to see how one kind of research, for example, primary research, can include the collection for both kind of data, quantitative data and all qualitative data. So obviously, when we talk about research methods in the last presentation, so the tools, techniques you're adopting to collect the data, the facts or figures that helps you to answer the research question. So we mentioned quite a few already, and you should be very familiar, such as surveys, experiments, observations, focus groups, interviews, observations, and for example. So as you can see, and if you do primary research for quantitative data, if you would require quantitative data for your research, you may use surveys, or you may use experiments or mechanical engine observations. If you require qualitative data, you may do focus groups or you may conduct individual in-depth interviews. Okay, so these are really good examples of one kind of research and what kind of data you would require. Okay. So qualitative and quantitative also refers to the data collection process. So what kind of data you require, whether the data is qualitative or quantitative. We have discussed the quantitative and qualitative when we talked about your methodological choices, whether you research qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method, mono, multi, or mixed. So you may still recall the two examples we give you when we discussed the methodological choices, especially for mixed method approach research. And we give you the two examples where the first research looks into the quality of care given to elderly people in hospitals. And we asked you, how can you design a mixed method research? And we're combining qualitative and quantitative data. So first we said you may be able to interview some elderly people and then find out what is their experience or their comments in terms of the quality of care given to them. And then that is primary research, is not about qualitative data because you are speaking to them and probably most likely to be interviews, to the people or to their family members. So kind of primary and qualitative, isn't it? And then you may support your research findings by finding some statistical data or figures from health services or government websites or details on comparative death rate or length of stay in hospitals, for example. As you can see, all these data are quantitative, aren't they? Because they are very statistical and figure-like, aren't they? And obviously, you don't have to, you don't have to, as a researcher, to speak to people to find out that, because you can always get this data from your desk research, which is known as secondary data, isn't it? So this is a very good example, as we said there. So for mixed method, you don't always have to do primary research, and it's a very good combination of where you are combining qualitative data and quantitative data with primary research and secondary research, isn't it? So the second example on examining why more English students from low-income families fail to attend university is the same, isn't it? So you may start from quantitative data and a secondary research looking into the statistics of numbers from the higher education related, government or department. And secondary, you can find it from existing data available on the website, official government website, and then the figures, statistics, which are qualitative. And then you may want to interview some of the families, from low income background, and particularly the students who did not attend university through interviews. So interview, you're speaking to them, finding out their views, understandings on qualitative data. But the fact of interviews and speaking to them is primary research, isn't it? So it's a very good example to explain how you can combine qualitative research, quantitative research, and primary and secondary research. Okay, so in your research, so you may be able to think about, oh, do I need primary research? What kind of data I would require? Or should I include some secondary data? What kind of data I would require? Do I only need quantitative, or I need combination both? Or for research as well, do I need to do primary research and secondary research? Okay, and I hope that reminds you a little bit and also helps you to kind of refresh and kind of refer you back to the previous sessions we have discussed it. So by now, I think all the knowledge will be able to be connected together, and as we said, the alignment and coherence will come in, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. Okay, so just to highlight here, the data you require for your research, no matter it's quantitative or qualitative data you require, it does not necessarily have to be from one type of, primary or secondary. It can be from both. Yeah, so we talked about the primary research tools as interviews, observations, but you may use some existing information that is available already as well. So just to say the combination and the overlap between qualitative, quantitative, primary and secondary research. Okay, so there are some secondary qualitative data examples here, which are kind of most likely in words or images. And as you can see, a lot of people probably analyze, for example, advertisement or posters, or labels of particular packaging or product. So these are all the typical qualitative data that is existing already in secondary research. I'd also like to remind you that whether your research is qualitative or quantitative has already been determined by your research question, okay, by the topic for your research. But the kind of data, whether your data you require, whether it's primary or secondary, or the kind of research you need, whether it's primary research or secondary research, is depending on you yourself as the researcher, and then your skill sets, your time available, and the resources available, whether the data is available already, or is the literature required is there. Okay, and then you determine whether you need to do primary or secondary research. Okay, we have actually discussed the concept of quantitative research and qualitative research under our methodological choice presentation in the fourth week, I think. But just to have a very quick recap while we're here. Yeah, so quantitative research is more concerned about figures, numbers, and statistics, and the data and that you collect, or the findings you have will be normally presented as numbers, and using tables, graphics, or charts to illustrate them. Yeah, and then obviously those are likely to be collected from a large sample, so probably at least 100. Yeah, and addressing the kind of research questions, answers to how many, how much. For example, how many people shopping online nowadays amongst the senior citizens, or how much to what extent they agree this whatever statement, or satisfied with their online shopping experience. Yeah, so they are mostly concerned considered as descriptive research in a scientific approach. On the contrary, for qualitative research, and they are more concerned with words or the text or what people say, and especially the meaning behind it. Yeah, so the kind of data you collect or findings you get are normally expressed in words, and then what you are finding is not to say which word has been said or how many times the word has been used. What you are concerned, or what you need for your research, the meaning behind the words, and the way how they expressed it. Okay, so normally the findings are collected from smaller sample size, and the answer to questions like what they experience, how do they feel, or why do they feel like that, kind of questions. Yeah, so the techniques are likely to be interviews and focus groups, as we said in the kind of typical qualitative data collection methods. Yeah, and that they are normally reached via exploratory, interpretive, or evaluative approach, or that kind of research purposes. Yeah. And again, we presented to you this slide before as well. For quantitative research, the data are more structured and you are using statistical analysis. And then the conclusions are likely to be very objective. And then you're believing into the facts. There's a reality for you to find out or test. And then the main data collection methods are likely to be surveys, experiments. Yeah. So, and then for qualitative research, and the data are unstructured because they're expressed in words. Yeah. So you're looking into the meaning out of it, the summary, what the meaning behind, what they said. Okay. And it's very subjective conclusions because the views from the particular participant or interviewee in your research is his or her personal views, very subjective. Yeah. And there's a lot of involvement of you as a researcher in interpreting the meaning out of the words. Yeah. So obviously they are collected mostly likely to be in interviews, focus group discussions, or observations. So I think by now, when we're talking about the qualitative quantitative research, and then you can connect back from the very beginning what we said, what is your research set to do? Yeah, what is the purpose of your research? And I think you can kind of link back to what we've discussed in the past few weeks. What is the purpose of your research? Yeah, if your research is exploratory research, is likely is qualitative research, isn't it? If it's descriptive, describing something, or explaining something, is likely to be quantitative, isn't it? So if it's evaluative, it may be qualitative, or it could be, your research combination of the above. It could be either qualitative or quantitative, or mixed methods, aren't they? So now you can say the connection, okay? So from the very beginning, when you set up the purpose or your research question, the way how you form your research question kind of leads to the later on how you collect the data, what kind of data you would need. Yes? So again, I think by now, when we're looking into this data collection, primary, secondary, quantitative, or qualitative research, you can refer back to all the out layers we discussed before. Okay, so as we mentioned, after having decided what your research question, what your research set to do, so whether it's kind of explore, explain, evaluative, and or combination of both, and then you link back to see, what is theoretical underpinning and how does that lead to my data collection methods. So I'm going to explain to you one by one, just to have a quick review of the previous sessions. Okay. So by now, talking about qualitative data, quantitative data, so what kind of data your research require, and then we talked about, quantitative is more like, objective conclusions you're looking for, and for qualitative research is more subjective conclusions. And I think when we talk about the term objective and subjective, and you can think about the philosophical underpinning, the very out layer, the first layer of the research onion, when we talk about ontology, epistemology. Yes, so for example, if your research is quantitative, it's likely you're adopting objectivism ontology, isn't it? So, so if your research is qualitative, and so obviously your ontology is likely to be subjective. And then the similar in terms of the epistemology, isn't it? So epistemology, positivism lead to quantitative, interpretivism lead to qualitative. And obviously that also links to the methodology we said here, which is also the theory development or approach, isn't it? Whether research deductive and inductive, I'll talk about in a minute. So this all links to the data you require, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Yeah. So from the very beginning, so your philosophical underpinning, so really leads you, what do you believe? What is reality? If you believe reality, there's a reality there, one reality there for you to find out. So very objectivist view. So that means your research is likely to adopt a quantitative approach. Yeah, so you're looking to the figures, numbers to test or to find out. Okay, if you believe there's no reality or realities can be negotiated, and knowledge is created, by meaning with a social interaction in different contexts by people. So that's likely to be qualitative, isn't it? So interpretivist and subjective view. So, and all these are now and hopefully forming or into a shape and then, connecting together. Okay. So moving on to the second layer, the theory development process, and which is referred as methodology in the last slide, is about deductive or inductive approach, yeah, or abductive, which is in between. So again, having mentioned about ontology and epistemology under the research philosophy. So if your research is kind of, as we said, objectivist and a positivist philosophical underpinning leads to quantitative research, it's likely you are going to adopt a deductive approach, isn't it? So where usually began with theory driven, so read theories or read the literature, and then you probably come up with hypotheses, and then you collect the data and then to test the hypothesis, yeah, because you believe there's a true or false. Okay, so if your research is more subjective or interpretivist or constructivist, philosophy, which you believe into knowledge is negotiated, interpreted by, the human and in particular social context, you can adopt inductive approach where, as we said in the example, you may go out to speak to people to find out what their views are before you kind of probably, do some extensive reading, find out what other people have already said. Yeah, so inductive is where you begin with research question and the collection of the empirical data, so your primary data probably, yeah, which you used to generate theories or hypotheses later on. And obviously, as we said, you can always use a combination of both, deductive or inductive approach, which is called abductive, as we discussed before. Yeah. And also, this also links back to what we mentioned about the third layer of the onion methodological choices is your research mono method, either quantitative or qualitative, or could be multiple methods, multiple quant or multiple qual, or mixed method, yeah, both quantitative and qualitative, a nice mixed quantitative, which helps you to understand the same research question or the same social phenomenon. And also, this also leads to the fourth research onion on the research strategy, isn't it? So whether your research requires quantitative data or qualitative data, it depends on what the strategy you would like to adopt. Yeah, is that experiment, surveys, or ethnography, grounded theory? And as you may say, for the first two, experiment and survey, are referred as strategies under the fourth layer, but both of them can be specific research methods, the tools, techniques as well. So a bit kind of a more abstract or constructive, a term used under methods. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter really, but if you use them as a method, and you say they are the method. Yeah. If you're use them as strategy, you say the strategy you adopt is survey, and specifically on the method, it could be online survey or could be questionnaire, for example. Okay, so as long as you understand what you use this term for. This slide or image I got it from online with a reference here, and I think it's a nice kind of a summary of all the different strategies or methods, or here as referred to methodology because it includes secondary research, and with reference to their relationship as quantitative or qualitative, and also connected to the cost or time or the comments in relation to the kind of research they are. Obviously, for secondary research, it says can be either quantitative or qualitative, and then the cost is free and low cost, and the time required is quite short, and because the advantages of secondary data, as we mentioned. Yeah, so the comment is noted as usually a great place to start for any research, but often not detailed or specific enough because secondary research are done by other people, not necessarily for your own research purpose. Yeah, so they may not be as relevant or specific to your own research question. Okay, and for surveys, as it says here, just give you a few examples. I won't read them all. Okay, for surveys, they are likely to be quantitative, and then the cost varies and depending on the whether you would offer incentives or the way how you design your question or design the survey or administrate them, whether you do it by yourself or by other people, which in the industry, for your personal research, you do by yourself, and there should not be any cost, or for example, there should not be any incentives offered to participants. So you may print out your questionnaires or your surveys, or you may which might cost you something, but you may send them as online surveys, which might not cost as much because you may have access to free online software as we're introducing in a separate presentation, so which would not cost you anything. Okay, and the time required could be medium because it depends on how long the participant get back to you or answer your online survey, or you return your post survey, for example. The comment under survey is excellent for measuring attitudes across a large population and for answering specific questions. And obviously we said and also linked to the characteristics of a quantitative research. Yeah, you're looking to how much kind of questions, and then more kind of objective conclusions you require. And another one I want to talk about is interview. So interview is typical qualitative research, and then the cost similar as focus groups, but can be much cheaper depending on the audience and the interviews, because you're not likely to involve a lot of them. The sample size is much smaller. It could be up to 10 interviews you do for your research. Yeah, but the time could be short, medium, and depending how you schedule interviews, you may schedule 5 interviews in a day and get it all done, recorded, and another 5 in another day. But just having said, the time required is short, medium in the process of interviewing, but the transcription can be a bit time consuming, and we give you a bit more detail when we talk about interview in a different presentation. Okay, the comments under interview says it is good for exploratory research along with deep dive into specific topics. Yeah, so exploratory research and then investigating into people's views. Okay, so when you have time, have a quick look at the table and have a better understanding of the kind of research methods you adopt and then the indication of them as well. Okay, so another nice summary of the characteristics of qualitative research and quantitative research, and then got reference here from Merriam 1998, and then again I would not go through them one by one because we have touched upon them pretty much in the previous slides and in another presentation as well. So but just to say, there are so many different concepts or views on them, but as you look into details, they are likely to be very similar in terms of qual and quant. As long as you understand what they are okay, and you're able to explain, most importantly, how they're connected to the previous sessions we talked about, or the different outer layers of the research onion, if you do adopt Saunders research onion as part of your whole research design. Yeah, and as you can see here, just one thing I want to highlight is the mode of analysis. So for qualitative research, it's likely to be inductive, and for quantitative research, it's likely to be deductive, as we mentioned earlier. Okay, so please do have a look at through, and they probably mention something which are slightly different than others, but the essence are the same. Okay. So to finish off this presentation, again, I'd like to highlight the importance of engaging with the module, yeah? And obviously the presentation does not cover everything that is discussed in the textbook, but whenever you have time, please do engage with the core textbook. But most importantly, as I said, please do start thinking about your own research, and no matter your research is qualitative or quantitative, which has already been determined by your research question. Okay, so you should know by now whether your research is qualitative or quantitative. Okay, and then you think about the resources you have, or the time you have and the possibility of conducting primary or secondary research. Okay, and then you can roll out and carry out your data collection later on. But for the purpose of this module and then the research proposal assessment, you need to discuss how you plan. Okay, you plan out whether you do primary or secondary. The data you require quantitative or qualitative are nicely explained. Okay.